80 years ago, the world was holding its breath. World War II was staggering into its final, most destructive chapter. So today, we're going to walk through that last month, a crazy period of high-stakes strategy, top-secret science, and a terrifying new weapon that really would change our world forever. Just listen to that. That's a real radio transmission from a B-29 bomber crew flying high over enemy territory. No flak. That means no anti-aircraft fire. The skies are weirdly clear, but you can just feel the tension in his voice. So, what were they carrying, and what was their target? Well, the answer to that starts 3 years earlier, with a secret project that was trying to build the impossible. You see, the weapon sitting in that bomber's belly, it was the result of maybe the most secretive and ambitious scientific project in all of human history. It was a race against time that was about to kick off a new, and frankly terrifying, atomic age. They called it the Manhattan Project, and it was a monumental effort. We're talking about the world's sharpest scientific minds, all gathered in a secret city, Los Alamos, New Mexico, working around the clock in this desperate race against the Nazis. Their one goal? To harness the power of the atom and build a weapon with a destructive force nobody had ever seen before. By July of 1945, the whole project just hit its climax with breathtaking speed. On July 16th, the Trinity test was a success. The bomb worked. Then, just 8 days later, at the Potsdam Conference, President Truman kind of casually tells Soviet leader Joseph Stalin about a new weapon of unusual destructive power. Now, Stalin, his spies had already told him all about it, so he just played it cool. He simply wished Truman well in using it against Japan. The atomic poker game had officially begun. And what a weapon it was. The test, codenamed Trinity, went off with the force of 21,000 tons of TNT. A man-made sun literally rose over the desert. The scientists who saw it, they knew right then that warfare, and maybe the world itself, had just been changed forever. This wasn't a theory anymore. It was a terrifying new reality. With a working bomb now in their pocket, the focus snapped from science to pure strategy. This successful test armed Allied leaders with this horrifying new option, and it led them to issue one final, stark ultimatum to Japan. So on July 26th, the Potsdam Declaration laid out the terms, and the language was crystal clear: surrender unconditionally or face a consequence beyond anything you have ever seen. The bomb wasn't mentioned by name, but that phrase, prompt and utter destruction, well, it was a very thinly veiled threat. Over in Tokyo, Japan's leadership was completely divided. They were kind of hoping the Soviet Union might step in and help mediate a better peace deal, so they chose to meet the declaration with strategic silence. This was a fateful decision. That silence was read as defiance, and the order was given to get the bomb ready for use. You know, the target selection process itself is pretty chilling. Kyoto, Japan's ancient capital, was on the original list, but the Secretary of War, Henry Stimson, had it taken off. He argued that destroying its cultural treasures would make any post-war reconciliation almost impossible. So that left Hiroshima, a city that hadn't been touched by firebombing raids, as a #1 target. A clean slate so they could measure the bomb's full, devastating power. And so, on August 6, 1945, from a remote Pacific outpost on Tinian Island, this meticulous and deadly plan was finally set into motion. Okay, so here's the brief. The mission was led by a B-29 bomber named the Enola Gay, which was actually the pilot's mother's name. In its belly, it was carrying Little Boy, a gun-type bomb that used uranium-235, and its explosive yield was equivalent to a staggering 15,000 tons of TNT. At 8:15 a.m. local time, the bomb bay doors opened up. Little Boy was released. For 43 seconds, it just fell silently towards the city. It was designed to detonate at 600 meters, an altitude that was calculated to unleash the most destructive blast wave possible, right across the heart of Hiroshima. The result was instantaneous and catastrophic. In less than a second, a blinding flash and a wave of incinerating heat just vaporized the city center. Somewhere between 70 and 80,000 people were killed instantly. And by the end of that year, because of radiation sickness and horrific injuries, the death toll would climb to over 140,000. Later that same day, President Truman addressed the world. He finally revealed the atomic nature of the weapon, and he repeated his warning. The message from this reign of ruin was clear. This is just the beginning, unless Japan surrenders right now. You would think that would be the end of it, right?
But despite the horrifying news from Hiroshima, Japan's military leadership just refused to give in. The deadlock in Tokyo was still on. And so, 3 days later, a second mission was launched. And this one seemed like it was cursed from the moment it took off. Now, this second bomb, nicknamed Fat Man, was a totally different beast. Unlike the simpler uranium bomb dropped on Hiroshima, this was a more complex and powerful plutonium implosion device, the exact same design that they had already proven worked back at the Trinity test. The mission was almost a total disaster. A fuel pump failed, trapping hundreds of gallons of fuel. The crew missed their rendezvous with the observation plane. And then, when they finally got to their primary target, the city of Kokura, it was completely hidden by smoke, partly from nearby steel mills where workers were deliberately trying to obscure the city. So after 3 failed passes over Kokura, with fuel getting critically low and enemy fire getting closer, the pilot had no choice. He diverted to the secondary target, Nagasaki. This incredible turn of events actually gave rise to a new Japanese phrase, Kokura's luck, which basically means to narrowly escape a terrible disaster without even knowing you were in danger. So as the bomber turned towards Nagasaki, Japan, Japan's leaders were about to get hit by 2 hammer blows, almost at the same time. One from the sky, and another from an enemy they had really hoped would be a friend. At 11:02 in the morning on August 9th, a brief break in the clouds over Nagasaki let the bombardier release Fat Man. At almost that exact same time, Japan's last hope for a negotiated peace was completely shattered. The Soviet Union launched a massive invasion of Manchuria. The strategic vice had closed. They were now trapped between atomic annihilation and a total invasion. That combination, the 2 atomic bombs and the Soviet invasion, it was decisive. Faced with this impossible reality, Emperor Hirohito finally stepped in. In his historic radio address to the Japanese people announcing the surrender, he acknowledged they just couldn't keep fighting an enemy that now possessed a new and most cruel bomb. On August 15th, Japan announced its surrender. And on September 2nd, the formal documents were signed aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, officially bringing the Second World War to an end. The events of that August brought an end to the world's deadliest conflict, but they also unleashed the nuclear age. Now, 80 years later, we still live with these weapons. And the question remains, will that terrible dawn over the New Mexico desert and the ashes of 2 cities be the last time their full power is ever unleashed in war?